Hey, it's Chris. WWDC 2021's keynote is now officially in the books, and in this video, I want to do three things. Number one, I want to give you three under-the-radar things that you might have missed. I want to tell you what the three most exciting announcements were for me personally, see if you agree with me, and then to wrap it all up, I want to give you guys three things that I found personally most disappointing. All right, well, let's get started with three overlooked or underrated, just kind of under the radar details. And there's a lot to choose from, like low power mode coming to Mac and also to iPadOS, or package detection coming to your HomeKit enabled cameras, custom domains finally coming to iCloud Mail, Apple not making you upgrade to iOS 15 if you don't want to. I mean, there's watchOS 8 finally letting us set multiple timers. But one under the radar thing that I think is actually a pretty big deal is that Siri is finally getting offline support, because right now, if you lose your internet connection and you try to do something with Siri, nothing's gonna happen. So you can't even do something as simple as make a reminder, for instance, or add something to your calendar if Siri is disconnected from the internet. The next under the radar announcement that I think is a pretty big deal is that web extensions, browser extensions, are finally coming to the iPhone in Safari, but probably more importantly, to Safari on the iPad. Chrome plugins have been an integral part of a lot of people's workflows, including mine, for a long time. So the potential here for iPad users is really huge, but the grain of salt here is that it's really gonna depend on what extensions become available. There has to be a better selection than the Safari extensions that are currently available for the Mac. All right, now here's a super underrated feature that absolutely wasn't even talked about on stage, and that is that iOS now has a built-in authenticator, a password authenticator with autofill, which is awesome. And that means we can wave goodbye to having to use something like Google Authenticator or another third-party app like Authy. We're now gonna be able to set up verification codes under passwords in settings, which is gonna be a whole lot more streamlined. Hey, if you're liking the vibe of this video so far, this would be a good time to get yourself subscribed, because I've got the beta for iPadOS loaded up right here, the beta for iOS loaded up on this phone. I've got the Mac beta actually on the iMac over there, and so I don't want you to miss my reviews and coverage of all these new features. Okay, so what are my picks for the three announcements today that got me the most excited? Again, there was a lot to choose from here, like shortcuts coming to macOS, SharePlay for watching, listening, and sharing your screen together with other people, live text for being able to do stuff with text in your photos, the Safari overhaul, especially the tab groups, and not to mention the new iPad multitasking enhancements, including the new shelf and app switcher capabilities, and finally the app library on an iPad. But one of the announcements that definitely ranks in my top three is the new focus capabilities. So being able to set up dedicated zones for work, family, exercise, driving, etc., where only certain apps and people can break in on my devices and disturb me or be seen, that I think is gonna be a real productivity booster, number one, and maybe just a quality of life improvement. The killer feature for me here is being able to have my status automatically displayed in messages when people contact me so they can see that I have notifications silenced. Basically, don't bug me, I'm working or I'm hanging out with family. You can create a bubble around what you're doing, and it's gonna help you let other people respect that bubble as well. All right, one of the killer new features that debuted today in my book was the quick note functionality, which on the iPad lets you quickly make a note regardless of the screen that you're on. So basically from any screen. Now, again, I'm gonna be covering this in detail in my upcoming iPadOS 15 review tomorrow, but it's actually way more feature-packed than I think you'd even expect. For instance, it's aware of the app behind it, which is important for persistent linking. It's resizable, and this is really cool. Let's say you've been making some quick notes on a particular web page. When you navigate back to that web page, you're gonna get a thumbnail that pops up in context and will let you continue making those quick notes on that particular page, for instance. Really smart stuff. Now, a feature that was completely out of the blue, totally unexpected for me, was universal control, which lets you use one keyboard and mouse to seamlessly control multiple Apple devices. It's pretty amazing that you can even drag and drop files from an iPad to a Mac with no special setup required, just simply having these devices next to each other on a desk. I definitely think there's a lot to love with this feature. There's so much here that I'm gonna have to really dig into it, maybe even do a separate video on it. But for now, let's move into the disappointments category. Because look, Up until now, I've been very happy with my Mac. I've been very happy with my iPhone. If nothing even changed on those two devices in terms of their software, I still would have been happy. But I've been frustrated with the iPadOS experience. And after today's event, I kind of remain somewhat frustrated with the iPadOS experience, even though I do actually really love it. So where I'm headed with this is that my top 3 disappointments from today's event are all iPad related. And disappointment number 1, and I'm sure subscribers already know what's about to come out of my mouth, is that we didn't get any Pro Mac apps, I guess, migrating over to iPadOS. I'm a little bit frustrated here. Apple gave us the new iPad Pro in particular, which you could deck out with 2 terabytes of storage and up to 16 gigs of RAM. That's a ridiculous amount of RAM for an iPad Pro even. And you have this incredible thoroughbred style hardware that is just begging for certain apps to utilize it. And we didn't see it today. Now, developers, for instance, have been asking for Xcode to come from the Mac to the iPad for a long time, and they didn't get that today, but what they got was the ability to write apps in Swift playgrounds. So Apple sort of gave people what they wanted in that department, but not really. And instead of Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro, we kind of got a demonstration from Apple of Universal Control, which is basically saying, hey, you can have Final Cut Pro on the Mac and use it with, in a way, your iPad, in that you can drag a file that you've been designing on your iPad over into Final Cut Pro with Universal Control, but no Final Cut Pro on the iPad. I could kind of rant about that all day, but I'm not going to. I'm going to move on to the second disappointment for me, which had to do with the multitasking features that came to the iPad. Now, I really don't want to complain too much here because the new multitasking features that we did get for the iPad are cool. They will make working with multiple apps better and a little bit easier. And everybody has their own ideas about what would make multitasking on the iPad better. But I was hoping for at least having 3 full apps running on the screen, visible on the screen at once, not counting slide over. Give me skinny apps. I don't care. I want to be able to have 3 different apps open and drag and drop and reference between them all at once. My third and final complaint today is that we didn't see the debut. I just was sure that we might see it, of proper external display support for iPad users. I mean, with the launch of the 2021 iPad Pro, Apple went to the trouble of including a Thunderbolt port, which is great for file transfers, nice and speedy, but they also pointed out that it could power the $6,000 Pro Display XDR. I mean, why even go to the trouble of pointing that out, honestly, seriously, for Pro people, if we're not gonna get real, meaningful external display support for the iPad? Maybe that's coming in the future. Maybe Pro apps are coming in the future. Different people are saying, well, maybe this or that hints at whatever. But I kind of got the vibe from Apple today that they're real happy for you to have multiple devices. Not an iPad or a Mac, for instance, but use them all and use them together to the point that there isn't a product that's going to meet your needs and be awesome. It'll meet some of your needs and be pretty awesome, perhaps. But the product really is the Apple ecosystem in its totality. That's the product that Apple's really pushing at this point, which is cool. The ecosystem really does a lot, and it does more than ever after this WWDC, but it can also be kind of frustrating. Anyways, thanks for watching my recap. Those are some of my thoughts just initially on this event. I've got my iMac loaded up with the new macOS beta. I've got this iPhone here loaded up with the iOS beta, and I've got my iPad loaded up. You can see the widgets across the top on the home screen here with the new iPadOS beta, and I'm gonna be checking out these new features. I'm gonna review them for you, go hands-on. So if you don't wanna miss any of that this week and in the coming weeks, make sure you get yourself subscribed. I'll probably be talking about a lot of the other stuff, digging way in, going under the hood on all this stuff even more in depth in the podcast that's coming up. So you can get subscribed to that as well, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Later.